So that's the conspiracy theory, so to speak. Was it exactly what you expected? Was there bits that you thought, I thought it was a bit more salacious than that? Were there bits that you thought, oh, crikey, that actually sounds like there might be something there? And do you feel that the film adequately explained it?
Well, the CP, I'm shocked.
He's never mentioned.
Yeah, I'm shocked that allegation is there, considering how small a deal they make of that, because that's not great.
No.
Like, I would let a fraudster or an embezzler in my house, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I would let them in the house. I wouldn't let them near any computers, but I'd let them near the house. I wouldn't let somebody who's looking at stuff in the house.
No, exactly.
Like, fuck that.
No, that does seem to be like, well, it's a very serious allegation, isn't it? And Giuliani's very sort of free with that.
It's just thrown in like a bonus track.
Yeah.
It's really weird to me that that's not being made more of a deal of. How they've handled the volumes where we've got someone's making a copy and he's editorializing. There is so much data on a volume that's associated with an operating system, but who's signed in, when they've signed in, deleted files that might be potentially recoverable, which is a little bit different with SSDs, I know, but still, all that stuff that if the story is as they've claimed, they have handled it so bad. Even the guy, making copies of stuff on the drive itself, like all that stuff would need to be preserved in some way.
Yeah, it doesn't give there's not a strong line of evidence, because the problem is basically at the very first sort of juncture, somebody's been manipulating the data, if only to sort of like move it into files and stuff like that. But the problem is that if somebody's moved it, you don't know at what point that manipulation started. So it makes it very, very difficult. Just for the sake of clarity, all the emails concerning CEFC, all the emails concerning Burisma, the suggestion is now that they are real. They are definitely emails that were sent by Hunter Biden to those people. What is not known is there's a huge amount of data on there, so it is not known what is real or where the actual first laptop is.
So emails aren't exactly stored on laptops, are they? So my point is then, to access those emails, you've actually logged into someone's computer. You've logged into a browser on their laptop and gone through their files, like gone through that browser. It's not like he's actually looked at the files, or what?
It depends how he's doing that. So yeah, with something like Gmail, yes, you could be using a web browser and maybe he's saved a password on this browser and so on. That's possible. It's also possible that the emails are sitting on his Mac Mail or his Outlook or something like that, and there literally is a copy of them locally.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Which is what I imagine that these guys are suggesting has been the case, that there is a copy of the emails locally.
If you're going to recover the emails, like just say somebody's email account, okay, would you need to recover each email individually, or would you just recover Gmail, say?
Maybe.
And surely, actually, there would be no need for that, because all that Hunter would do is get a new laptop and log into his email account from somewhere else. So I'm struggling to understand. What I'm trying to envisage is how John Paul Mac Isaac found that Burisma email that sort of he thought was suspicious.
I would have thought so, and I think even if you were recovering them as a bunch of separate files, you would probably do no more than look at one, maybe two. And I'm guessing I've never done this because, I've never done this. Even if you were recovering thousands of emails, there's very little reason to look at more than one or two to make sure they're okay. One plot point, which is actually, it's very important, going back to the password bit, what was it, Bumfun69, whatever it was, the fact that the password is known is very important, because at least on Macs, it's so trivially easy to encrypt your drive in such a way that you're not getting in without a password. And that was one of the things I was thinking about as we were talking about this thing was, okay, if this is a Mac and he's encrypted the disk as he really should do, as everybody should do on any system, then you need the password to get in. So if he's not been given a password, he's not recovering anything.
Could somebody hack the password remotely? Could somebody find out your password on a MacBook like that? I don't know. Say, could Kim.com find out what your password is on your Mac or whatever? Or some other famous hacker?
Let's look at those two things in turn, right? Could somebody work out your password? Probably not, unless it's something simple and somebody brute forces something. Could somebody log in remotely with a password? It depends. It depends on what you've got set up. Obviously, if it's not connected to any Wi-Fi, certainly not. Is it possible to connect them back to Wi-Fi before it gets signed in? Maybe some of those weird recovery things, it's possible. But then the volume wouldn't be decrypted at that point. I think that gets murky. I don't think that that's likely. I think the most likely thing is that what's happened is that he said, I need to recover this. Okay, what's your password? My password is whatever, and he's written it down on a bit of paper. That feels true to me.
Okay, well, that would infer then that basically it is his actual physical laptop, not just the content, that he did actually go into the shop in Delaware. And, well, so either then somebody's overheard his password, somehow got hold of it, or he's given the password to John Paul MacIsaac.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't suspicious of that. But this is the thing. It's perfectly possible that somebody's got his password through some other way, got onto like his iCloud or whatever, pulled down some photographs of his dick, and got his emails, and then interspersed it with whatever crap they found.
So we just don't know.
Yeah, well, like the CP stuff especially looks really suspicious to me because there's no big deal out of that's been made, and that's so obviously wrong in a way that's not really relatable, if you like. So if I wanted to do somebody political damage, that I would probably lead with that before anything around embezzlement or whatever. Because, right, you know what? Everyone understands embezzlement, okay?
Yeah.
It's not right, it's not good, but hey, if somebody wants to make a load of money, I understand why somebody would want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is so messed up, and I'm really suspicious of that. That sounds like bullshit, frankly.
Well, yeah. We shall see, basically. So the point is, basically, there is a debate as to whether not only is the content real, but is the laptop real, and is the story about how the laptop came into the possession of various people real. And the thing is, it very much just depends on who you believe. Like, on the surface, it was definitely him because of a sticker, but I can't really identify him because I'm legally blind, and blah, blah, blah. Sounds like bullshit. But the strong sort of argument that it is true is the idea that basically, A, there's the signature, and B, you would need the password to get into it. But as you've just said, it's not impossible for someone to hack somebody's password. So it could be that basically the whole content was, though real, hacked, copied from some sort of remote sense, and then put on to this laptop at a later date. And I don't think we'll ever find out that. But what we do know is that the emails that we're speaking about, the ones about Burisma and the ones about CEFC, those specific ones are real. 10% for the big guy, they're all real. They were written by Hunter Biden. Whether the receptacle on which they were presented to the FBI, etc., is the original, no one will ever know, I don't think. But just for the sake of clarity, those are real. So, anyway, there's not a lot of trivia on this week, I'm afraid, because there's not a lot of trivia around the subject, I'm afraid. Hunter Biden's life, it's a bit tragic and horrible, really, the poor sod. Like, he's born in 1970. In 1972, his mother and his sister are killed in a car crash in which he's also involved. And he gets brain injuries, which apparently doctors have feared could have been permanent. And a few days later, so this was in late December 1972. A few days later, in January of 1973, Joe Biden is sworn into the Senate. So he becomes a senator very, very shortly after losing his wife, daughter, and having his son in critical condition in hospital, which is is a horrible turn of events, isn't it? Like,
yeah, totally.
In 1977, Joe Biden marries Jill Jacobs, and she becomes his stepmother. He goes to the Archmere Academy High School, but he's just before graduating. Hunter's busted for cocaine. So he's got cocaine special, and this is at high school. So I think he's 16, 17, something like that, already getting busted with cocaine. Now he's given 6 months probation, and then afterwards his record is completely expunged. So he's wiped clean. So probably because of who he is, he got a really, really lucky turn there, because basically, he was then able to go on to Georgetown University in 1992. And there he meets a lady called Kathleen Bueller, and she gets pregnant, and they marry the following year in 1993. In 1996, he graduates from Yale Law. So although he's seen as a bit of a sort of, fuck up, for want of a better words, he's actually a very bright bloke. He's a qualified lawyer. He is, to a degree, qualified to do some of the jobs that he's actually doing. Is he getting paid extortionate amounts? Oh, God, yes. Is he only getting those jobs because of what his last name is? Oh, absolutely. But he's not completely useless. He's not like an Ivanka Trump or a Jared Kushner or anything like that. He actually does have a set of skills that can be used. Now, as soon as he leaves university, he accepts a consultant position at MBNA. Now, this was incredibly controversial at the time, because Biden Sr. had just been completely influential in pushing legislation that was incredibly favorable to bank holding companies, specifically this one MBNA. So very early in his career, Joe Biden's doing policy things that result in his son getting a very favorable job. Now, it doesn't mean that he wouldn't have put that policy through anyway, but what it means is it does look a little bit like a you scratch my back and I'll sort your wayward drug addict son out with a really lucrative job sort of thing. So, that may be what it was. And by 1998, so 2 years after joining this firm, Hunter Biden, and this is 2 years after he's come out of university as well, he's the vice president for this banking holding company, which is not bad going, is it? Unfortunately, 2 years later, he's a completely uncontrollable alcoholic. So it doesn't go brilliantly for him at that particular firm. A year later, in 2001, he starts to work for the US Department of Commerce for the Clinton administration. Now, again, you're not telling me he's not got that job because of who his dad is. Of course he has. And he also became a lobbyist for Old Acre, Biden, and Bel Air, which is, it's a lobbying firm that he started. Lobbying firms are basically trying to get businessmen to give politicians money, and then in exchange for policies that the business would like that politician to push through. So this is the life that he's involved in. But I suspect this is the life that many of sons and daughters of rich, influential people, including politicians, are involved in. By 2003, he's had his first stint in rehab, but at least he got to go to a nice one. He got to go to Crossroads, which is the one that was set up by Eric Clapton, and apparently is rather good. So didn't really work.
I thought it was set up by Bone Thugs.
But in 2006...
I thought it was an ITV sitcom.
In 2006, him and his Uncle James is going to become very prominent in these stories, because he basically seems to be sort of tied to the hip to Hunter throughout his entire life, working for incredibly dodgy firms, pulling down massive, massive salaries. They start a hedge fund firm called Paradigm Global Advisors. Or they don't start it, they purchase it, they buy it off a bloke called James Park. James Park was married to the daughter of the Reverend Sun Myung Moon. Have you ever heard of the Moonies?
Yes, the Moonies.
Yeah, they're kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely, they're a cool. What people don't seem to realise is that the Reverend Sun Myung Moon was an OSS asset, and he formed the Unification Church with two Japanese fascists who were also just so happened to be OSS assets, whose names escape me at the moment, but it's his on my blog that I wrote. So the Moonies was formed about at the height of MK Ultra's experiments by three known paid assets of the CIA.
OSS?
Office of Strategic Services, which is the precursor to the CIA. It was the CIA before we got founded in the early 40s, and during the war there was the precursor, which was the Office of Strategic Services. So yeah, it's very, very suspicious that such a thing had happened. And even throughout sort of like, for example, one thing that people don't know is the Moonies very much supported the Bush family, George H.W. and George W. Bush. By support, what I mean is on numerous occasions, they literally moved thousands of Mooney members to districts in which they felt that George Bush would not vote particularly solidly, and got them to register as homeowners there and then vote for George H.W. Bush. Isn't that crackers?
What?
Yeah. That's apparently got absolutely nothing to do with them being set up by members of the CIA. At the minute, they have a unification church is run by his son. They have a golden statue of Jesus who has a golden AK-47, and they're connected to a firm called KR Arms. And basically, yeah, that's what they're into now.
And the crown of bullets.
Yes, that's the one. Yeah, it is
Yes.
quite metal looking, if I'm brutally honest, but it's also clearly insane. But yeah, that's so. Also, you see, there was a bit of trivia. So
Yeah.
anyway,
I thought the Moonies ended ages ago, but apparently
well, they
they're
did
still
because
going.
he died. But they've now broken off. Essentially, his wife became sort of like leader of one sect, and his son became leader of another sect. But his son is ultra violent. Eric Trump has endorsed them on a number of occasions. But yeah, they're basically all about God, guns, and government, but in a really, really sort of weird, fetishized way. But
Some
yeah,
like
strange.
Far Cry 5 shit. There's a reference.
Yes, very much like Far Cry 5. Yeah, almost exactly like Far Cry 5. So
But
yes,
wasn't that Japanese prime minister who was shot recently? Wasn't he shot by somebody whose family had fallen in with the Moonies?
really? Oh, I did not know that.
I think
You may
so.
well be correct.
I need to look this up. I'll go to Wikipedia. The truthiest truther that ever truthed. Suspect, motive. Asked to join the Unification Church. His mother given around 100 million yen, which is $720,000. Parcel of land. Declared bankruptcy. The guy blamed the Unification Church for his family's financial problems. Researching the church's connections to the Abe in the months before the attack, he believed the former prime minister spread the church's influence in Japan.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were set up originally. They're Korean, and they were set up with help from the KCIA, which is the Korean Central Intelligence Agency. But the Korean Central Intelligence Agency was set up by the American Central Intelligence Agency, and as I say, the three founding members of the church were all CIA assets, like admitted CIA assets. So yeah, that's a very interesting. Yeah, Unification Church is certainly a strange rabbit hole. Now, what was interesting was that about the time, this is like 2006, so Hunters bought this firm off this guy that's connected to the Unification Church because he was a cocaine addict. Like, this is ironic. The guy, James Park, he was addicted to cocaine, so he needed money. At the time, Hunter Biden was completely sober, and so he had money, and so was able to buy the firm with his uncle. Now, there's another thing as well, like, also at this time, he was appointed to a 5-year position on the board of Amtrak Trains. Now, that might not mean a lot to anybody outside.
Biden loves trains.
Precisely. Biden has the nickname Amtrak Joe, and he's sort of credited with doing a lot to publicize the train. Basically, the backstory is that when he was working in Washington, he wanted to get home to Delaware to see his kids, and so he would take the train because he's an everyman. That's his sort of backstory. Whether this is true or not, who knows? But this is yet another example of Hunter getting a very, very lucrative job with a firm that has benefited directly from his father's political career. So, this is a bit of a theme, really. In 2008, now this is important, he forms the consulting firm Seneca Global Advisors with Christopher Hines of the Beans family, who also happens to be John Kerry's stepson, and a gentleman called Devon Archer, who would later end up in prison on fraud charges. Now, Seneca Global Advisors LLC, this is the firm that basically received huge amounts of money from Burisma and also received the $3.2 million from the wife of the former mayor of Moscow. So Seneca Global is important, and it was formed in 2008. 2010, he's in rehab again, but by 2011, he's on the board of the United Nations World Health Programme, and he stays on that board for years, and this is why the meeting in 2015 takes place. In 2012, he manages the venture capital group Eudora Global, and from 2013 to 2020, he's on the board of BHR Partners, which is a energy firm based out of China. In 2013, he also served as a counsel for the New York law firm Boies, Schiller and Flexner. And in 2013, he decides to knock all this on the head, and he decides to join the Naval Reserve, which is essentially, sort of territorial navy, kind of, as far as my understanding goes. Like it is joining the army, essentially, or joining the armed forces. I wouldn't want to do it, so fair play to the guy. But unfortunately, he's discharged in 2014 for cocaine use. Now, he claims that he was sober at the time and that somebody must have sprinkled cocaine on one of his cigarettes. That's why he tested positive for cocaine, which I think we can all safely say is bollocks. Like, now, this is further sort of compounded by the fact that same year he decides to go to Mexico for ibogaine treatment. Does anyone know what ibogaine is?
No, is it some quack treatment for cocaine addiction? I don't know.
Well, kind of. It's a hallucinogenic that is not dissimilar from ayahuasca, but it's a lot darker in the trip. It can physically kill you, but some people say that basically it reorganizes your brain and is very, very good at just like cutting addictions straight away. And there's numerous places, it's completely illegal in most parts of the world, but there's numerous places in South America where you can go and get this ibogaine treatment. Many, many people have died taking it because it's not very good for you. It apparently just lowers your breathing, almost like sort of heroin does, to the point where you just stop breathing or can have a cardiac arrest. There's a punk band called Rich Kids on LSD, and Jason Sears, who was very heavily addicted to heroin, who was the singer, he went to try ibogaine treatment, but unfortunately died of thrombosis before he was even able to actually start the treatment. But other people have actually died from the treatment. There was Bruce Parry. Is that bloke that goes and lives with tribes and stuff? I'm sure he did on the BBC. I'm sure he did an ibogaine trial and filmed it, and it looked horrendous because it's just hours and hours and hours trapped inside your own mind, and it's not a fun experience. It's not like acid or mushrooms or anything like that. It's a bit of a trek, basically. But anyway, in 2013 he decided to do that in Mexico. It didn't work because basically he's still addicted to crack the following year, and in 2014 that's when he's joining the board of Burisma. And basically, documents on the laptop, which have been shown to be true, show that from 2013 to 2018, through all these different ventures, Hunter Biden earned over $11 million, which isn't bad going, is it?
It's not bad. I just want to observe that both Hunter Biden and Dill Bigtree went to Mexico for a dodgy treatment because of crack problems.
Did he?
Yes, whenever I say crack problems, I mean he had hemorrhoids.
Oh, yes, I do remember that. Didn't he nearly die during the surgery or something?
I think he nearly died getting there because blood was leaking from his arse.
Oh, dear.
That's a technical medical term from start of COVID, MD.
Because there is that game called Oregon Trail where you can die of dysentery. Yeah, classic.
So at the point when his arse was falling out, that's when Del Bigtree decided to actually trust Big Pharma. That's interesting.
Well, he went and got unvaccinated blood.
Yeah.
Well, of course he did.
I didn't know the details of the arse thing. I knew the rest of it. Something I should have known, actually.
Well, I mean, I assume that's why he nearly died. He had hemorrhoids. He nearly died. These things were related. That's what happens, right? I don't know.
I've never heard of it before, but yeah, I want to believe it, so it's true. So Anyway, in 2015, unfortunately, that's when Beau Biden dies from, I think, from a brain tumor. And apparently, Hunter, they were very, very close. And he starts smoking crack every 15 minutes and drinking heavily. And also, according to documents that were found on his laptop, he signs up for Ashley Madison, which is the dating site exclusively for married people to cheat on their partners. So, what? Yeah, so not having the best time of it, apparently.
Interesting thing about Ashley. I'm sorry to interrupt. I shouldn't keep doing this, but an interesting thing about Ashley Madison was whenever they got hacked,
Yeah.
and flipping everything got leaked, everything. And one of the things that was really apparent was that almost all the women were bots.
Yes,
So
it was mostly men, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was married men who were trying to cheat on their wife, talking to bots that weren't real. It's so tragic.
It's a bit like the sequel to Blade Runner in many ways.
Yeah.
Maybe I should watch Blade Runner.
He's got a robot girlfriend. That's all it is. But yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if Hunter Biden got any joy with it, but he certainly signed up for it anyway. So, and this was again shown through documents on his laptop. Right. So 2015, he's in rehab again, and this is when the email is released saying arranging the meeting with Poroshenko of Burisma with his father. In 2016, he has yet another relapse, gets into a fist fight with his drug counsellor. He then moves in with a homeless crack addict whose name is Bicycles, and they live together smoking crack for 5 months. So, an interesting period of time. That was not the strangest thing that happened during this period. In 2016, same year, he decides that he needs to get himself clean. So he decides that he's going to go to Sedona. So he decides to drive to Sedona, which I believe is in California. So it's pretty much
Arizona.
Oh, is it? Yep, fine. Anyway, he decides to smoke crack all the way, but he knows the direction because he's following the hallucination of a giant barn owl that he strongly believes is his guardian angel.
Can you not just use Google Maps?
Well, you don't need to when you've got a giant guardian angel barn owl. They're far more forgiving with the theft of data as well.
I'd pick barn owl every day. Yeah.
Does the barn owl know the traffic half an hour up the road?
Yeah. You know how high they fly?
Yeah, you see them. They can turn their head all the way round. They can see everything.
Exactly. Barn owl every day.
Yeah.
Fuck the satellites.
Absolutely. Totally. But he got through 3 cars on the trip. One, he crashed and after falling asleep at the wheel. Another one broke down and he returned it to the dealership absolutely full of drug paraphernalia. But he did eventually make it to rehab in Sedona. He was actually picked up from rehab by Haley Biden. Now, this isn't a coincidence. She's got the same name because she was previously married to his brother. So he started having an affair with not only this woman Bicycles, but also his brother's widow. Now, it's not necessarily as seamy as it seems. They say that basically they were always very good friends, and after nothing happened before Beau died at all, and afterwards they both sort of like found each other through grief. So the affair with Haley becomes public, and his wife, with whom he's already had 3 children, she divorces him. And he's broke at this point, and he's spent that entire 18 million quid.
What?
Oh, he's completely flat broke. In fact, his wife is also broke because he's stolen all her money as well. He owes $313,000 in back taxes, and his checks to the maid that cleans their house have been bouncing for the last 3 months, apparently. So
that's why in the movie that guy just wants him to leave, and he throws a load of credit cards at him.
I think so. Yeah. Again, it's sort of implying that. So he's having a bit of a bad time. So this is, again, though, in 2017, this is when he starts working with CEFC as a consultant. And during this time, he earns nearly $5 million. Now, if you remember, this is the very famous 10% put aside for the big guy, and he got $1 million from Patrick Ho. Also, if you believed Tony Bobulinski, basically that money was supposed to go to him, but he surreptitiously changed the name on the contract in order to steal that money from him. Also, at the same time, he got a 2.8 carat diamond from Yi Jianming. Yi Jianming is that gentleman that is connected to the Chinese military that went missing, that basically owned the CEFC firm or founded it. And basically, he's the person that introduced him to Patrick Ho. Now, they do make reference to Patrick Ho in the film. He's the bloke that he refers to as China's fucking spy chief. So that is the bloke. And again, in the film, he's actually a big, fat, middle-aged guy, but for some reason, he's shown as a slim teenager in the film for some reason. But whatever. In 2018, basically, Patrick Ho was convicted of bribery and money laundering, and he gets 3 years. So it transpires that Hunter wasn't able to help him particularly anyway. In 2018, again, he relapses again, and he spends 5 months in the Chateau Marmont. Now, this is where the film happens. Now, going back to the film, can you remember in the film, this is where he talks to the dog and where he wakes up and they steal the shot from Wolf of Wall Street. Something actually I remembered that struck me, like, what the hell happened at that party? Why is everybody passed out in the one room all fully dressed? Did somebody drug the punch or something?
I thought it was strange as well. Everyone just passed out in their spot.
Yeah.
I don't think he's ever been to a proper party, this guy.
It would look more like the Heaven's Gate party than any party that I've actually been to. Like,
that is classic.
But, like, yeah. Anyway, so in 2018, then he basically so he's in the Chateau Marmont for about 5 months. He stayed there. He checked into another rehab. He lived with a sober coach. He relapsed again. He then tries ketamine therapy, which apparently is a thing. He relapses again. He has a family intervention in which he storms out and he goes to go and live in California. In 2018, this is also the year that Peter Schweitzer's book comes out, which is basically the first thing connected to Breitbart that starts talking about corruption to do with the Bidens in Ukraine. In 2019, he splits with Haley and he marries a South African filmmaker called Melissa Cohen, and they have a child together named Bo, which is his 4th child. He also has another child at the same time with a stripper from Washington, D.C. called London Roberts, who he basically accidentally got pregnant having a fling. In 2019, he supposedly leaves the laptop in Delaware. And also that year, Rudy and John Solomon start their stories about the Burisma corruption and the fact that this money was withheld in order to get Viktor Shokin kicked out. OAN, America's online, that stupid fucking news network. I can't remember what they're
one
called.
Which said the election was rigged by Venezuelan voting machines.
That's the one. That's them. That reliable
One
source.
American network, is that right?
That's them. Thank you. They go to the Ukraine, and it's them along with Rudy Giuliani that find the tape of Biden berating Poroshenko and essentially blackmailing him. But they get this tape from Andrzej Derkach, the KGB agent. So this is released in sort of late 2019. About the same time that Trump has his very famous call with Zelensky, where basically he blackmails the Ukrainian president by saying, we know you need this military hardware to fight against Russia, who had invaded Crimea and had eyes on the rest of the Ukraine. And we won't give you that equipment unless you find us dirt on the Bidens, which is completely corrupt and a completely impeachable crime. And yeah, he basically should have been properly impeached. I know he was impeached, but he should have been found guilty of that. Early 2020, the Typhoon report comes out, and that's the one that Steve Bannon was involved with, that came from the Swiss company that claimed that basically Hunter and Joe were in the pocket of the communist Chinese government. In May 2020, the tape is released to the wider public, the Derkach tape, and in September 2020, Rudy finally gets hold of the laptop and the New York Post articles come out. So you can see that basically the stuff around the Ukraine and the Bidens was sort of filtering around in the background in 2018, but for some reason didn't start to come to prominence with the public until the year that Joe Biden was going for the election. And specifically around October, which was just prior to the election primaries and such like that. So, and these just so happen to come from people like Emma Jo Morris of Breitbart, Steve Bannon of Breitbart, Rudy Giuliani, who's connected to the Trump campaign, John Solomon, who's connected to the Trump campaign, and various other people who are connected to the Trump campaign. Now, not that should infer any sort of degree of bias about this information, but it is interesting that it all came about from these sources at this time. In 2020, just after the laptop sort of comes out, Hunter's started doing painting and getting ridiculous amounts of money for his, frankly, not very good paintings. But he completely settles his tax bills. He pays £450,000 in back taxes. And so, according to the IRS, he's pretty much cool now. A year later, in 2021, his Beautiful Things memoir comes out, and he repays a final tax debt that was owed. So he's now completely clear of all debts, according to the United States government. And then this year, the two most exciting things that have happened, or the three most exciting things that have happened, are he had the gun charge brought up, that he basically had a gun when he should have declared that he was an addict. The Marco Polo report came out saying that there were hundreds of crimes that were detailed on his laptop. And just a couple of days ago, Elon Musk decided to send details of Twitter's private emails concerning Hunter Biden's laptop and why it was not sort of like spread on the medium as much as it could be, and which particular files Twitter took off their platform at the behest of the Biden family. So that's what's happened this year. So it's still going. It's completely current, basically, this story, and people are determined to make something huge out of it.
Yeah, people are posting about it today.
Yeah, and they will do. And they say the tropes will be that there's corruption and that Hunter Biden's laptop is real. Now, let's just explain it, right? Okay. The content is real, right? Is the laptop real? No one will ever know. Nobody knows whether he gave it to John Paul MacIsaac or someone else gave it to John Paul MacIsaac. Nobody knows whether the content was hacked by somebody and then put onto a third-party laptop. All we know is that after a couple of years of scrutiny, we can finally determine that some of the emails are definitely real. And these include the ones that pertain to all the allegations made by the New York Post and the ones that form the basic crux of the conspiracy theory. So if anybody asks you, is Hunter Biden's laptop real, you can say yes with a but. But for simplicity, is Hunter Biden's laptop real? Yes. Yes, Hunter Biden's laptop is real. Does it show any particular crimes on there? Well, let's find out. So obviously the first real thing that sort of pertained to this came out in May 2020, the Derkach tape. So Andrzej Derkach, that was sort of promoted by OAN and it was promoted by Rudy Giuliani. And this was basically a very, very choppy, poor quality conversation between Joe Biden and the then president of Ukraine, Poroshenko, in which he basically reiterates what he said about Viktor Shokin, but even harsher, basically like intimating that he knows that his son's corrupt, that he knows his son's involved in corruption, and that he knows that this will all come out unless Poroshenko steps up for him and initiates a cover-up. Now, you may be asking, Neil, this sounds explosive. Why have we not been talking about this more? We've mentioned it a couple of times, but why have we not?
That's what I'm wondering.
Well, I'll tell you for why. Because almost immediately it turned out to be bollocks. Like, it was a very, very crude splicing together of previous recordings of Poroshenko and Joe Biden based on an actual real conversation, but with other out of context bits from other conversations crudely spliced in to give the impression that it was, valid. And it was so nonsensical that even Steve Bannon stopped talking about it pretty damn sharpish. The One American Network was really sort of pushing it, but they're a joke organization. And again, the provenance of this is it came from a bloke called Andrzej Derkach, who is connected to Rudy Giuliani, who we'll talk about in a little bit. But the long and short of it is that this guy's a KGB agent. So that particular tape was known to be a fabrication almost immediately after it came out, basically. But That's not what the New York Post was talking about. The New York Post were talking about Hunter Biden introducing his father, who was at the time the vice president, to Vadim Pozharsky. And basically he says, we've got the email. He says that, "Dear Hunter, thank you for inviting me to DC and giving me an opportunity to meet your father and spend time together. It's reality and honor and a pleasure." And then there's the email from 2014 that says, "I'm asking for advice on how you could use your influence for the company's behalf." Now, let's just address the meeting. The meeting was a real meeting. It was in Washington, D.C. To say the New York Post actually found this out later through Miranda Devine, who did the laptop from hell. It was in the private garden room. It was on April the 16th, 2015. Now, what the meeting was actually set up for Joe Biden to come along and meet this Orthodox priest called Alex Karloutsos, who had recently retired from the Greek Orthodox Church, but was apparently an incredibly important figure there. And so he decided to swing by because this chap was going to be there, because he is also a representative of the UN World Health Programme, and that's what the meeting was for. So was Vadim Pozharsky there? Absolutely, he was there. So what happened? Was he introduced to the vice president? Was this an example of corruption? No, not really. It wasn't. Basically, what happened was they passed by. They sort of like he came into the room, spent 5 minutes speaking to Alex Carlos, who is the Orthodox priest, went over, said hello to Hunter, and Hunter said, "This is my friend Vadim. He'd very much like to say hello to you." To which Joe Biden said, "Hello, Vadim," shook his hand, and walked away. Now, this has been completely confirmed by checking his diaries. People who were at the meeting said exactly the same thing. Michael Carpenter, who's Biden's foreign policy advisor, said, "I've never met with this Pozharsky guy. In fact, I'd never heard of him until the New York Post article." And various of the people who were actually at the meeting confirmed this. He says it was a meeting that was about food. Biden turned up to speak to this very venerated Greek priest, but then basically just disappeared very, very, very shortly afterwards after doing a handshake with the bloke from Burisma. Now that, in context, is why, yeah, thank you for letting me meet your father. It was an honor and a pleasure. I'd say the same thing if I was introduced to the vice president or the deputy prime minister or something by their son. But to imply that this is an indication that there was some sort of foreign influence or that he was able to get some sort of favors off of his father is complete nonsense.
That's all they show in the film as well. They literally just show him introducing him and saying hello and walking off.
And that is all that happened. Like that is literally all that happened. Now, what about the email saying, "Can you use your influence on the company's behalf?" That sounds dodgy, doesn't it?
That does sound dodgy.
Well, I mean, let's not muck about. Like, that is entirely the reason that these firms have hired Hunter Biden, because he's the vice president's son. And so he must have some sort of influence. He might be able to get us in touch with movers and shakers. Like, that is entirely why he's been given the job.
Well, it's just clout chasing, isn't it?
Of course it is. Unfortunately, he responds to Pozharsky in this chain of emails. What he will do and says is completely out of our hands, because unfortunately what happened is that Joe had this basically say-so with his son that you could do this if you want, but I'm not getting involved with anything. I hope you know what you're doing, was the exact quote that Joe Biden said to his son, but I'm not getting involved in anything. Now, do all these people who are hiring him think that they're going to get access to Joe Biden? Of course.
Probably, yeah, totally.
Yeah. And does Hunter and his uncle James intimate very strongly that, yes, they will get access to Joe Biden? Yes, of course they do. That's why they're paid millions and millions of dollars. Do they ever? Well, I mean, if this meeting is anything to go off, no, not really. There's really very little to show anything at all. Now, it goes on to Mac Isaac and basically talking about, how he made the copy of the hard drive. Now, what it doesn't tell you is the bizarre nature of the fact that he kept hold of this hard drive for over a year before he decided that it was worth turning over to the FBI, or 6 months before the FBI, a year before it was worthy turning over to Jim Jordan, Rudy Giuliani, and various other people connected to the Trump administration. What they also don't mention is that for some reason, John Paul Mac Isaac started copying the data before the 90 days was up. So he was illegally stealing the data, and he has admitted to this. Why is a bit of a mystery. How he would have found that particular incriminating email in a huge cache of emails has never been explained.
Can we just be really, really clear here? This is copying the stuff not to the hard drive that Hunter supplied, but to some other systems elsewhere?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the point. By the time the FBI have got it, there's been at least 3 or 4 copies made of it. One which is to go to Rudy Giuliani in the case of his death by the Secret Service. So, again, the evidence trail is, shall we say, shonky at best.
I find this to be a bit strange as well, because like he says that he came across different files in there and he saw things that are illegal. But when I copy stuff from my computer to an external hard drive, like I'm not seeing thumbnails or anything of the content. I'm just seeing names of the files.
Yeah, and that never made sense to me as well, because if you're copying films over, you don't necessarily have to look at the films. You just assume that I'll copy everything from the hard drive across, because you don't know. Like, hello, this one of you with the 2 black girls, do you want to keep that? Like, that conversation never happened, right? Okay. Like, so how's he knowing which ones to go? Why is he watching these films as he's downloading them?
Yeah, especially if you're working, professionally with, I take stuff off machines that are wrecked or whatever. Like, presumably you're going to have some utility that you're not even going to. It's not like you're going to open up Mac Finder or Windows Explorer and Control A, Control C, Control V. Surely, if you're doing that often, you've got some other utility that automatically pulls down everything it can and bucks it somewhere else, and you're not even looking at the individual files or the directories. Maybe. Somebody can fact check me on that and find me wrong, but I would be astonished if somebody who does that for a living is relying on manually going through files like some oaf.
Yeah, quite. But again, somehow he managed to find something that was so worrying that he made several copies, including one to be sent to Rudy Giuliani in the event of his death. So, yeah, ridiculous. It goes on. So less than 8 months after Pozharskyi thanked Hunter Biden for his introduction to his dad, the then vice president pressured the Ukrainian president Petro Poroshenko and Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk into getting rid of Prosecutor General Viktor Shokin by threatening to withhold $1 billion US loans in December 2015. Shokin, at the time of his firing in March 2016, had made specific plans to investigate Burisma that included interrogations and other crime investigations to all members of the executive board, including Hunter Biden. Now, this is the crux of the claims, that basically he was investigating corruption that of the firm, corruption that involved Hunter Biden, and that it was insisted by Joe Biden that he was got rid of because he was investigating this. Now, if that was true, that would be shocking. Unfortunately, not a bit of it is true. Well, what is true is that Joe Biden did say that we want him removed from the investigation, and we are not giving you $1 billion unless you get rid of him. That is true. That is 100% true. Okay, but you know why? Because Viktor Shokin was stalling his investigation into Burisma. What Viktor Shokin had actually done was he'd not done any investigation into Burisma at all. He'd got in touch with Zlukevsky and said, if you pay me a serious amount of money, I won't find anything. And so it was for that reason that the IMF, the World Bank, the UK government, the Ukrainian government to a degree, and the American government, along with, I believe, people from Europe as well, all said you need to get rid of Viktor Shokin. Okay, because he's not investigating, not because he is investigating, because he's not investigating. So you know what happened once they actually got rid of Viktor Shokin?
It started getting investigated.
Yes. And Burisma was eventually fined $7 million in back tax that it owed. So if the intent was to stop the investigation, the exact opposite happened. There's more to it, though. Do you know when the period of investigation was, when Burisma was being investigated by Viktor Shokin?
No.
2012 to late 2013.
Oh.
So before Hunter Biden actually worked for the company.
That's very damning, yeah.
It's ridiculous, isn't it? So basically, what they've tried to say is that the meeting in 2015 was an indication that basically they were going to then get into cahoots and launder or embezzle money in order to stop an investigation into Hunter Biden. And the opposite was true. Joe Biden's actions actually ensured that the investigation went ahead, but it was nothing to do with Hunter Biden at any time anyway.
I found this really curious around, they show footage during the credits of Biden boasting publicly about this, right? And there's two things that I thought was strange about that. One was he's the vice president, so constitutionally, his position is he sits in a house somewhere and waits for the president to die.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
Oh, and he breaks ties in the Senate. And the other thing is, if you're doing a corruption, you don't stand, you don't go to some public forum and say, and then I done a corruption.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's I don't look. I've never done a corruption.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong. So maybe I'm missing some of the finer details. But one of the core elements of a successful piece of corruption is not leaving evidence lying about everywhere, like you boasting about it.
It's also important to remember that he said that at the Council for Foreign Relations. So Millennium 2000 vibes.
Oh, there you go.
And also another weird thing is they say, like in the movie, they call it Council of International Affairs or something like that. But when they show the clip at the end, it says Council on Foreign Relations. So
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, it's sort of weird. It's like with the Gigio Google thing. They include it and then they don't. Why?
That Gigio Google thing was probably the sloppiest thing that happened in the whole film.
But basically, so the long and short of it is, there's this meeting that he arranged with Vadim Poroshenko. It's literally just a handshake, and the threat for Biden to withhold the money, A, wasn't solely from Biden. B, actually started the investigation rather than stopped it, and C, was nothing to do with Hunter Biden anyway. So like already we're off to a fair old start. Where did this story come from? Well, this story came from Emma Jo Morris, who had never written an article before in her entire life, but decided that basically she'd do a story in the New York Post about Hunter Biden. Now, she actually put a lady called Gabrielle Fongage. She credited her with a byline also on the article. Most people think to give it credibility, and the woman, this Gabrielle woman, basically said, "I had nothing to do with the article at all. I didn't even know about it until I saw my name on it when it was on the internet." But again. They've been and checked the details of that meeting. They've been and checked the emails of everybody involved in that meeting, and there's nothing involving Poroshenko except for the fact that he was going to be there as a guest of Hunter, and basically numerous witnesses have said, yeah, he shook hands with him and he wandered off, and that was literally what happened. It's a big something and nothing. Now, the second big sort of revelation from the New York Post is that he pursued lucrative deals involving China's largest private energy company, including one that he said would be interesting for my family. And so basically, this is CEFC, where he's getting offered £850,000 a year, but then he's also given a huge sort of amount of money. And if you remember, the big sort of smoking gun was that, in addition, the email outlined a provisional agreement under which 80% of the equity of the company would be split among four people, H being Hunter, who got 20%. The email said 10% is also held by H for the big guy. And 10%, does that refer to Joe Biden? Yes, absolutely. Yes, 100% it refers to Joe Biden. And Hunter was saying that basically 10% of the equity of this company he would hold and he would give to his dad. So that's fairly damning as far as we can see, unless, of course, Unless, of course, there was some sort of other information that meant that this wasn't as damning as it might seem. For example, if there was another email that came back, like directly in that email chain, that Hunter Biden forwarded to the rest of the CAFC that said, spoken to the chairman, and he gave an emphatic no. What has happened is...
to the big man.
Yeah, basically, he's spoken to Joe Biden and he said, no, Hunter, I don't want anything to do with any of your lobbying stuff. I told you before, I want nothing to do with it.
Overall, it sounds like Hunter's, there's some stuff that certainly looks like attempts at corruption, but his dad sounds like a stand-up bloke in all this so far.
Well, it gets better than that, Stars, right? Because basically, let's examine the people that he's working with, that Yi Jianming. Is he a Chinese spy? I'd put my house on it that he's a Chinese spy. Okay, and Patrick Ho, is he a Chinese spy? Oh, yeah, he's very much a Chinese spy. So that element of the film, where basically they're saying you were dealing with people who are connected to the Chinese government because it's China, everybody's connected to the Chinese government, there's an element of truth to that. But, and here is, now this I think is the most important part, right? You know those deals with the CEFC, the companies that they were going to start up with, so 20% of equity, 850,000 going to him, blah, 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 10% for the big guy. That was, those firms, they never, ever started.
Wow.
It never got past the business proposals phase. So there was never 10% to give to the big guy. And even prior to that, the big guy had politely refused any involvement with it. So even if you were to say, yeah, but of course he'd say that in the email, there was no 10% to even have. Now, did he get a huge amount of money from Yi Jianming for consultation purposes? Yes. Did a lot of that go to his Uncle James? Yes. Did any of it actually start anything? No, nothing at all. Nothing.
So they ripped off some Chinese spies.
Well, they seem to have ripped off that Tony Bobulinski fellow by basically stealing his share of it. And the Chinese government, via these spies, seem to have paid them a huge amount of money for sort of consultation fees for a business that never gets off the ground. So, yeah, they've come out of it smelling of roses, to be quite honest.
I mean, if the Chinese government, which I hate,
yes,
for many reasons, wants to give me money for doing piss all, I'll take it. I mean, I know that's not necessarily their intention, but awesome.
No, it is. That's entirely what their intention was. They're trying to pay Hunter Biden and James Biden an astonishingly large amount of money in order to get close to the vice president and possibly the president, and to try and sow influence. That's entirely why they've done it. But it didn't work. It didn't work. It just didn't work. Now, was Hunter aware of this? I think probably. But was he ever going to actually give them anything? I don't think he can. I think it's all flatter. I think he just he trades on his name. He absolutely trades on his name. Now, the next explanation of this was from Miranda Devine. Miranda Devine is the author of The Laptop from Hell. And if you remember, she expanded on that business meal. She says that this really dodgy bloke, Vadim Berezhsky, was brought to the meeting. Now, we already know that the meeting itself was something and nothing. It was literally a walk past and a handshake, and nothing came of it. And there's literally nothing sinister about it at all. Who's Miranda Devine? Well, she's an Australian columnist. She's based in New York and she writes for the New York Post. She's also worked at the Boston Herald, the Telegraph, the Sun, and the Sunday Times. She's most well known for promoting the white genocide theory.
Good.
Yeah, the idea that basically black people or people of colour will move into a predominantly white neighbourhood, they will marry and breed, and this will eventually sort of push out the white people, and this is termed white genocide. 2 points. One, that's not a replacement then, is it? If their white people are still there, that's not a replacement. And two, there's no genocide in there. If you want to see a better example of white privilege, we don't even get genocided in our own genocide. That's white privilege on fucking steroids, that is.
For further information about post-white genocide conspiracy theory, listen to our cultural Marxism episode.
Absolutely.
Nice.
Like we go over that and what also sort of twaddle it is, essentially. She's also a climate change denier, and she also ran with the theory that, remember when Australia was on fire, all those bushfires?
Yeah.
She claimed that it was started by conservationists in order to make the right wing look bad.
So hold on a second. She says that forest fires were a false flag, not a false flag, but
Yeah, no, the false flag. She's not the only person that said that. Max Egan was really going for that one as well. Like,
No,
as
not him.
yeah, quite. Like, she also claims that same-sex marriage is a political tool to undermine the last bastion of bourgeois morality, which is the traditional nuclear family. And she also says that women abusing the welfare state is the main cause of domestic violence. So I think it's safe to say that this woman is absolutely batshit crazy. She also strongly believes that the last election was stolen. And she also, can you remember that poor lad, Quaden Bales, the lad that had dwarfism, and he made the video saying that he was being bullied, and then a load of unpleasant right-wing people jumped on and said that he was actually an adult in disguise looking for sympathy. And it turned out that that wasn't true, that he was actually a poor child that was being bullied with dwarfism, and that everybody said that was, what's the word, cunts. Well, she was the person that started it. She was the very person that started that,
Wow.
and she had to issue an apology to Quaden and his mother. And I believe she was sued for it as well. So that's good, at least. But anyway, so her story, again, I hate to sort of damn people with, like, by association or whatever, but it gives you a strong indication of where this sort of stuff is coming from. We've got Steve Bannon. We've got people very much connected to the right wing. We've got promoters of white genocide and all that very sort of fringe stuff. Essentially, she basically says the same sort of stuff. One of the things that she does say, she says that at the time, Burisma was paying Hunter Biden $83,333 a month. Now, she actually got that from John Solomon, who we'll speak about in just a second, but that's not true. That was actually Devon Archer's pay. If you remember that Devon Archer and Hunter Biden had that firm called Rosemont Seneca, well, basically, just prior to forming to joining Burisma, Hunter sold his share of it to Devon Archer. So Devon Archer used Rosemont Seneca as basically almost like his PayPal. Send it to them and then I'll get it. And so John Solomon found a series of payments to Rosemont Seneca of £83,333 a month and wrongly assumed that this was Hunter Biden's pay. But the problem is that by that time, Hunter Biden had left Rosemont Seneca. So the money was actually not going to him. It was going to Devon Archer. And Miranda Devine actually repeats this. And again, she talks about the meeting, but the meeting was to meet Greek Orthodox church figure Alex Karloutos. So remember basically the email where it says, Dad will be there, but keep it between us now. And the response was, okay, so the reason for the dinner is ostensibly to discuss food security. They tried to frame that in the article as like, that's the reason that we're going to pretend that we're there, but we're actually there to meet Vadim. But it's actually nothing to do with it because the person is Alex Karloutis' son that they're emailing. So what that email exchange actually is Hunter doing a really nice thing for an old Greek priest. And he's saying to his son, yes, mate, I've arranged it for my dad to... So here's the strange thing. He did actually arrange for his dad to meet somebody at that meeting. But it wasn't the Ukrainian. It was the bloke from the Greek Orthodox Church. And why did he do that? Because the bloke from the Greek Orthodox Church would have been absolutely thrilled to meet the vice president. And he thought that it was a nice thing. And so he arranged it with his dad and with Alex Karloutis' son. That's what happened.
Crazy. Wow.
Ridiculous, isn't it? But that's the thing that's being completely framed. Now, another thing that they don't tell you, okay, is that Burisma, when all this came out in 2020, what do you think the GOP did about it? Because, this sounds very salacious, and you know what the GOP are like. They're very keen to sort of like sling mud. I mean, basically, it would be a response to the Trump impeachment and, latterly the January 6th and stuff like that. So what do you think the GOP actually did in regards as response to the New York Post's articles.
They shared the hell out of it.
No, they
No?
they did, but they actually did their own investigation.
Oh.
So the GOP in as early as September 2020 started investigating connections to Burisma and Hunter Biden. This was prior to the laptop, but basically, as the investigation was ongoing, these emails became apparent. Do you know what the GOP found? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Nothing illegal in the relationship between Hunter Biden and anyone in China or Burisma. They said that it on the surface seemed problematic because essentially you've got someone connected to a potential president or vice president with corrupt companies, but that there was nothing illegal and that it altered no foreign or domestic policy. And so this is why it sort of slightly amuses me, because Rudy Giuliani's investigated it. Miranda Devine's investigated it. The New York Post has investigated it. The FBI has investigated it. The GOP has investigated it. Typhon Intelligence has investigated it. Steve Bannon's investigated it. Marco Polo's investigated it. The GOP's investigated it. All of these people have investigated Hunter Biden's laptop over the last 2 years. And the worst thing that they found was this meeting with Vadim Poroshenko, which is nothing. That is all they've found. They've been doing this for 2 years now. For 2 years. And they've never found anything. Going on to Rudy Giuliani.
Oh, here's my favorite. Before we get into Rudy Giuliani, right? I got a question for you, Neil, and for you, Ivor, because you remember as well. Isn't it a bit strange that Giuliani has become like forefront of this kind of conspiracism when 9/11 trutherism, he was the big bad guy?
Yeah. In fact, there's a song by Star Fucking Hipsters that basically references the 9/11. It's called 9/11 was an inside joke, and it says Giuliani made the play, made the evidence go away.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely.
He was the big cover-up guy. He was the guy who helped the whole thing happen. Like,
completely.
What's going on here?
I've also heard that he's connected to the mafia as well. I don't know whether this is true or not, but I think familiarly he's connected to the mafia. And interestingly, there's been two basically major investigations into the mafia in American history. One that was run by Robert Kennedy, and Robert Kennedy was up to his tits in the mafia, and one that was run by Rudy Giuliani. And if rumours are to be believed, Rudy Giuliani's up to his tits in the mafia, which I just find slightly amusing. But whether that is true, I don't know. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Rudy Giuliani, why people take him seriously at all? I mean, the guy's just... Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally. Like, he's a grotesque. He's just, he's a bizarre, strange person. Having said that, like, I think without Rudy Giuliani, we wouldn't have had the press conference outside the sex toys.
Yeah, he's been very entertaining recently, but it's just weird, like this pivot.
Yeah,
and the truth movement just doesn't see it.
No, but there may be a reason for that.
There is that whole thing, Robert Kennedy, whether he murdered Marilyn Monroe. That's I've watched a documentary about that. But I don't know if it's true. Yeah, that's another sort of CT to throw into the mix.
Well, I don't think it was. I don't think it was him himself, but the inference is that basically she was going to spill the beans on a lot of people, and the mafia did it via barbiturate enema. Is what I've heard. Apparently, as well, John Kennedy was terrifically... He was drugged to his fucking gills. Like, he was being given meth and opioids, and he had a really bad back and, like, loads and loads of problems. And apparently he was massively, massively indiscreet. Now, what's interesting is the Camelot crowd, which is like, his brother-in-law and the Sinatra and all of that lot, they were doing shed loads of cocaine. Some of it that was coming from Jay Sebring, some of it that was actually coming from Charles Manson, of all people. But that's for another time. But he was very anti-drugs, but was taking all these prescription pills that were given to him by the very famous Dr. Feelgood. Now, apparently, like, when he was very, very sort of like high on these things, he'd get ridiculously indiscreet, and he told Marilyn Monroe about Roswell, and he told her about all sorts of other, like, apparently this is the story, like really, really things that he shouldn't have told her, and that apparently sort of was part of the reason that she was deemed needed to be got rid of. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. We'll have to find out for a future episode, basically.
I mean, it sounds like bollocks, but I know that I have definitely said things that I shouldn't have said whenever I've been
Intoxicated?
well, not so much intoxicated, but interested, shall we say? Keen.
I do stuff when I'm drunk. My friend has got this fabulous expression for it. He said to me once, he said, Neil, does drunk Neil ever buy sober Neil things that he thinks that he might like, and you don't remember that you've bought them until they turn up? And then sober Neil's delighted, but can't remember when drunk Neil actually bought it. I was like, yeah, that does happen more often than I'd like to admit, if I'm brutally honest. But I just thought that was a lovely way of phrasing that. Like, sober Neil would fucking love this. And who's to say he doesn't need another bit of memorabilia about black metal? Like, so yes, exactly. But anywho, so Rudy Giuliani. So he's chatting away to Charlie Kirk, and basically what they're saying is that they feel vindicated because basically, although they were told that the article, they've been told for 2 years that Hunter Biden's laptop is fake. The Washington Post has now come out and absolutely vindicated everything that they've said, and by inference, all the stories of corruption, etc., etc., etc. Did the Washington Post? No, they didn't at all. Like, the story is here. It's called The Hunter Biden Story is an Opportunity for a Reckoning. And basically, what it says is what everybody knew already. We'll link it to the thing. I won't read the whole thing out because we're banging on now. But it basically says that, yeah, we didn't share this because we didn't know about the provenance of it. It looked like it had been hacked. A lot of it is revenge porn. Hunter Biden at the time was a private citizen. We couldn't, in good conscience, share this story as a fact because we didn't know if it was factually accurate. However, we have since found out that at least parts of it are factually accurate, but don't actually show any illegality, any corruption, or anything that is actually newsworthy. So with Giuliani and Kirk trying to spin it as basically they've been vindicated, it's a lie. It's a complete lie. They haven't been vindicated at all. What the Washington Post has said is, you know what, maybe perhaps we shouldn't have been so standoffish in looking at the contents of it because a lot of it has turned out to be true anyway. But I'll repeat, I knew everything that was on that laptop by this time because it had been on Twitter and it had been on Facebook and it had been in the Daily Mail and it had been on Fox News and it had been all over InfoWars and everywhere else. And Rudy Giuliani had been banging on about it for ages. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, the bit that Giuliani says about basically, like, why didn't Joe figure out this guy who can't hold his shit together was a multimillionaire? Did he not think that there might be an element of corruption and or nepotism going on? That is perfectly fair criticism from Rudy Giuliani. That is absolutely true. And it shouldn't happen. And there's more. He got like 200 million from Saudi Arabia. Oh, no, wait, sorry, no. That was Jared Kushner, wasn't it? Oh, I am sorry. I got that completely wrong. So this is bullshit. Like, if you look at what the benefits that Ivana Trump got for her clothing line and the jobs that she was allowed to do and that the two idiot boy kids were able to do, they're not qualified to do any of these jobs. They're not qualified to put on a fucking pair of trousers the right way around, right? And yet they're all particularly wealthy. Like, if nepotism and getting paid huge amounts of money for jobs that you probably aren't qualified to do that involve very little work, if that is considered corruption, then yes, we are seeing corruption here. But we're not seeing anything illegal, and we're not seeing anything like the Republican Party is trying, and Rudy Giuliani and Bannon and people that are trying to frame it. And when he says stuff like all of a sudden every week half of the guy's income would show up in his bank account, that's just bollocks. He's just completely made that up. What that comes from is something that we'll come to in a little bit. Basically, there was an email exchange on there between between Hunter and one of his daughters. And basically in it, he says that, don't worry, I won't take half your salary like somebody that we could mention, or some words to that effect. And what it does is it pertains to a time back in 2010 where Joe Biden had lent a load of money to Hunter. Hunter had pissed it up the wall. And so he says, well, I want this money back. But rather than pay it directly to me, pay for some repairs that are being done on the house. And so it's just Hunter Biden complaining, saying, I won't take half your money like Dad did that one time. So that's what that's pertaining to. When he says stuff like, he made $41 million in China. He made 18 million in the Ukraine. He made £3.2 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife. All of that is complete bollocks. The only one that's got even an element of truth is the 3.2 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife. That did go to Rosemont Seneca. But if you remember what I said before, Rosemont Seneca was nothing to do with Hunter Biden. He sold it to Devon Archer. What Devon Archer did was he sold a New York apartment building to the wife of Moscow's mayor. He sold it to her for $3.2 million. So yes, it went through Rosemont Seneca, but it's absolutely nothing to do with Hunter Biden, and it's a perfectly legitimate purchase of an apartment. So again, all of these things that are being sort of framed as sinister, A, aren't sinister, and B, have got absolutely nothing to do with Hunter Biden. So there's a text in which Hunter Biden says, I gave 50% for 30 years to Joe Biden. They never published that. This is what he's referring to. And A, that was published. It was in The Sun, and it was on Fox News, and it was in various places. You know how I know? Because I found it before I'd watched this interview with Rudy Giuliani. And it's to his daughter Naomi, and it says, I hope that you all can do what I did and pay for everything for this entire family for 30 years. He says, don't worry, I'll get the blame. It's really hard, but don't worry. Unlike Pop, I won't make you give me half your salary. And again, what this pertains to is a time when Hunter Biden had $2,000 in the bank. $2,000, that was all he had to his name. And he owed about $20K to his dad. And this was in 2010. And so he arranged for him to pay for the repairs on his dad's bank. So when he's saying, I hope what you did, I pay for everything for this entire family for 30 years. Don't worry, I won't make you pay half. I always get the blame. What he's saying there, if you look at the context of the email, is, oh, woe is me, I'm the black sheep of the family. Naomi's fucked up in some sense. And he's saying, don't worry, I won't hang this over your head like everybody does with me. Oh, God, can't I get a break? Why am I the black sheep of the family? Blah, blah, blah. And the reason that you're the black sheep of the family is because you keep fucking spending all your money on drugs. Like, it's very, very straightforward. I mean, this is all very clear in the actual laptop emails as well. There's that beautiful email from Joe Biden to his son that basically says, I love you, kiddo, but you're going to have to get your shit together. We can't carry on doing this, but always know I've got your back. And that was, if you remember, that came out recently. Jim Jordan and Marjorie Taylor Greene tried to present that as some sort of indication that they were horrible people, and it backfired quite spectacularly. Now, Tony Bobulinski, he basically is also being promoted by Rudy Giuliani. He says that they stole $5 million from him by basically changing the details of the contract. Now, Tony Bobulinski has taken this story to several people. He's took it to the Wall Street Journal. And the Wall Street Journal reviewed his evidence and said that there is no publishing of corporate records reviewed by the Wall Street Journal that show any role for Joe Biden. So he tried with the Wall Street Journal, and they basically said, there's nothing here, Tony. You've just made this up. There's no criminal activity, and there's certainly nothing that pertains to Joe Biden. Did Hunter rip you off? Don't know. We'll never know. But if he did it in that way, you're a moron. So he went to Fox News as well. And you know what Fox News did? They went through his emails and the contracts, and they said that they don't show any evidence at all that the elder Biden had any dealings with Sinahawk Holdings or took any payments from them or any Chinese firm. So Tony Bobulinski has already sent this to news channels, and he's also gone to the authorities as well, and they've all basically told him to sod off. So when people start bringing Tony Bobulinski up over the next few weeks, you know that it's nothing. There's absolutely nothing there. The final thing that Rudy Giuliani basically says is that there's child porn found As far as I can tell, that's fabricated. That's completely made up. And I'll tell you why I suspect that I know it to be true. Because as I said, there's already been investigations by the FBI, the GOP, Marco Polo, Typhon, Rudy Giuliani, the New York Post, Miranda Devine, Steve Bannon, and various other people. They've all and Marco Polo. They've already looked at the laptop in great detail, and the only things that they can keep bringing up are these tired old pieces of shit. As you quite rightly said, if there was child pornography on there, wouldn't that be the first and only thing that they would be focusing on? Well, the answer is yes, of course, that is what they'd be focusing on. And the logical inference from that is that basically it's bollocks. It's absolute bollocks. There's no child pornography on there. John Paul MacIsaac never said that he found child pornography on there. And he was so diligent that he found an email pertaining to a Ukrainian gas firm that he had no knowledge about, because he has absolutely no knowledge about the Biden family or politics. So again, we can pretty much skip over him. John Paul MacIsaac, in his interview, he gives very, very different reasons how he got the laptop, why he was scared of the laptop. Initially, he's scared of the Secret Service, then he's scared of the FBI, and then he's scared of the fact that Trump's getting a bad rap for his quid pro quo, when actually the Bidens are the ones doing the quid pro quo. And there's just nothing of the sort in any of the actual data that he produces. And I don't believe it. I don't believe that he had no prior knowledge of Hunter Biden. Like, again, he speaks about stuff that was very specifically reported by John Solomon and John Solomon alone, which was the concerns about Burisma. And for him to have intimate knowledge of that means that he's involved intimately in sort of red pill type politics, because otherwise there's no reason for him to know. So I don't believe him. I never trusted. It's dodgy as hell. Where'd you get the laptop from? From this blind bloke who couldn't actually identify it. But trust us, there's a load of fucking dodgy shit all over there. And what have the FBI said? Well, the FBI have said that, how did you get hold of this? Why did you keep this for 6 months before approaching us? Why did you then make numerous copies of it and send them to people like Rudy Giuliani? Like, none of it makes any sense unless basically it strikes me as a plan. I think the whole thing's been planted. Is the content real? Yes, the content's real. Is there anything on there that's actually incriminating in any way? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And the coordinated way, in, like, just as the New York Post is coming out and everyone else is coming out, this Typhoon intelligence report came out via Steve Bannon. Now, I didn't talk about this very much because it's a 64-page report. The long and short of it is it says that he was basically in bed with the communist Chinese government, and that Hunter was an asset, and that Joe Biden received money directly from the Chinese government in order to change American foreign policy. And this came from a bloke called Albert Marco, who apparently is a pollster and international relations buff and a US congressional expert. He's not. It transpires he's not. He's a failed businessman who seems to be friends with Steve Bannon from Florida. And the Swiss security firm, Typhoon Intelligence, hasn't, and has never existed. And the face of the agent that was purported to have compiled the dossier was created by artificial intelligence. And it transpires that absolutely nothing in the report that came from Steve Bannon was true. Absolutely everything was fabricated. It's just complete bullshit. And I think that the reason that he pushed this was because just prior to this, the GOP report came out in which they said that they found absolutely nothing illegal going on. So, yeah, it's not great, is it, to be quite honest? So, again, it's starting to look very, very dodgy.
The thing is, right, the whole thing, whenever you look at how they've presented this stuff, it all sounds super incriminating, but unpacking why it is a nothing burger is super complicated, super involved, very difficult to do. And I mean, you've got these guys, and they're just throwing bullshit at the wall over and over and over again. Yeah, and you've got the thing about it is the cleaning up misinformation is an order of magnitude more difficult than generating it.
That's called the bullshit asymmetry principle. Yeah.
You always the bullshit again. You in many ways have to amplify it in order for people to have an understanding of it, so that you can then debunk it. It's the classic sort of. I mean, they know what tactics they're using. It's the whole get someone to deny something in the newspapers. When did you stop hitting your wife? Because then basically the accusation is then repeated, and most people just come away with the accusation. And so this is why, like, we'll come on to the Twitter thing, for example. Like Elon Musk very recently, basically, he's given it to a journalist called Matt Taibbi, all the interactions between. They're basically saying, and people have jumped on it, including Elon Musk and Twitter, and said, the actual tweet they put out was, if this isn't evidence of like withholding the First Amendment, I don't know what is. And it turns out that is an incredibly accurate tweet, because he doesn't know what is. That isn't withholding the First Amendment at all. Like, what happened was, it transpired that there is a mechanism within Twitter that both political parties have used, where basically they can approach Twitter and say, that's not true, can you take it down? And what he exposed was Twitter staff basically saying, we don't know where this has come from, we don't know if this has been hacked, we don't know whether this is accurate, we can't allow this to spread on our platform, which is exactly the same thing that Facebook said, and it's exactly the same thing that the majority of the media said, because basically they can't prove that it's real, and so they don't want to be party to spreading mis or disinformation. And then his big revelation that 5 files were taken off of Twitter. They were all naked photos of Hunter. So they were revenge porn. So Elon Musk has presented this as, wow. And a lot of people have bought it. They've gone, look, this is clear election meddling. And it's like, he wasn't even vice president at the time when this happened. He was a private citizen at the time that this happened. That's not election meddling. And Hunter Biden was certainly nothing to do with it. So no, it's not suppressing information. It's not denying First Amendment rights. It's not partisan, and it's perfectly reasonable to do it in such a way, basically. But as you say, like, people don't tend to look at that as well. There's another perfect example. The Marco Polo report that came out this year. There was a big hoo-ha made about that, and then nothing happened. And they found 140 business-related crimes, 191 sex-related crimes, and 128 drug-related crimes. And you know how I know that, again, this is bollocks? Because the GOP's had this for over a month. They've looked at it and gone, no, there's nothing there. Now, I actually read the entire report. So let's have a look at this. 140 business-related crimes. Is there 140 business-related crimes in there? No, there's not. What there is there's 140 examples of what's called a SAR, a suspicious activity report, right? Now, a suspicious activity report is raised on any transaction that is above, I believe, $8,000. Now, bearing in mind that his monthly wage was in the region of $80,000, a lot of transactions to Hunter Biden will be raised as suspicious activities. These have all been examined by the IRS, and the IRS has determined that absolutely none of them are suspicious. Furthermore, upon reading the Marco Polo report, I read through a few of these suspicious activity reports. The very first one in the Marco Polo report refers to Rosemont Seneca in 2015, at a time when Hunter Biden didn't work for them anymore. So the very first suspicious activity report in this report is about a firm that isn't suspicious or illegal, and Hunter Biden didn't work for them at the time that the report was made. So, and again, just to give an idea of the person that's raised this bullshit, right? Okay, Garrett Ziegler, another pusher of the big lie. Also, basically, he was involved in the January 6th debacle, and he's described the January 6th committee as being made up of a bunch of anti-white Bolsheviks.
Oh, okay.
So,
He also said that any... Yeah, quite. You know,
a dog whistle for the Jews, essentially.
Yeah, pretty much. And what he's saying as well is that any female that speaks out against Trump, they're only doing that because, in his words, they are hoes and thots. But you know, so he might come across as a bit of a git, this bloke, right? Okay, but you like, he reassures us that he is the least racist person ever. So, I'm convinced by him.
I thought that was Donald Trump.
Well, evidently they're vying for this position. Right, Marco Polo, who's this firm that put out this absolute bollocks gish gallop of a report. They are also the people that published Ashley Biden's stolen diary. Now, Ashley Biden is Joe Biden's daughter. Now, this was stolen by two people, Amy Harris and Robert Corilander, and Project Veritas paid these two people $40,000 for this, but then they got cold feet and didn't want to publish it because they realized that it was illegally stolen. So they gave it to Marco Polo, and Marco Polo published it. Now, all that this diary says is that basically Ashley can remember that she was molested when she was a child by a neighbor, and there's also a bit in it where she describes showering with her father. So they're both naked. That's Joe Biden. She's a toddler. He's showering. So what Marco Polo did was mash these two bits together and put out a rumor that the diary showed that Joe Biden molested his daughter.
Shit.
Exactly. So this gives you an idea of the type of people that Marco Polo might be. So again, we're basically getting we've got Miranda Devine, we've got Steve Bannon, we've got Marco Polo, we've got Rudy Giuliani, we've got a whole series of people that have got some incredibly dodgy views on the way that America and indeed the planet should be run, and don't have the best reputation for being honest.
We should also probably mention here Project Veritas were the people who made that fake video where it's they're going to some abortion clinic and they're saying, I'll give you 500 for this sort of baby parts, and it was transportation costs, but they were like, they're selling the dead babies.
Yeah, they do that all the time. Like, he dressed up as a pimp and turned up at a company and basically implied that he would give them, it was Acorn, the company, which was sort of a democratic sort of leaning organisation. He turned up dressed as a pimp in a fur coat and implied that he'd made £1 million or so from trafficking children and prostitution children, and that he wanted to give Acorn this money. And he filmed all this, and the sort of the way that Veritas put it out was that basically, ha ha ha, see this despicable company, they'll take money from anywhere. Did somewhat backfire. He was arrested and charged with being a pimp because Acorn basically turned around and said, right, yeah, we'll definitely take that money. And then the second he got out of the room, they phoned the police. And so it completely backfired. Now, he will still promote that lie, but he did actually, I don't think he did jail time, but he did get a criminal record off the back of that. So again, Project Veritas, not to be trusted. Same thing with Peter Schweitzer, who did that Secret Empires, the American Political Class and How It Hides Corruption. That book that came out in 2018, he's an editor at Breitbart. So again, same people, same connection to the Trump campaign. Interestingly, that book, which seemed to start the Burisma thing, the Secret Empires, How the American Political Class Hides Corruption and Enriches Families and Friends, its conclusion was the Bidens hadn't actually done anything illegal in Ukraine. So the conclusion of the book that started the rumor that basically promotes, and it heavily infers that they did, but it actually says in the book that there's nothing illegal that's been done. And the very same thing with John Solomon, who's the person who prior to the laptop was promoting the idea that Victor Shokin I was going to investigate Hunter Biden. I was going to investigate. Well, it transpires, we already know that Victor Shokin wasn't, but it transpires that he's also admitted this. He said that he lied in court. He was never going to investigate them. And so basically John Solomon's information, which again formed the foundation of the idea, was completely nonsense. Again, John Solomon is a contributor to Fox News. He was a former editor-in-chief of the Washington Times. Now, the Washington Times is like a trash tabloid that designs itself to look like the Washington Post and fool people into thinking it is the Washington Post. Now, here's an interesting thing. Do you know who owns the Washington Times?
I think you mentioned them earlier.
I did. The Moonies.
Yes.
The Moonies own the Washington Times.
All right.
by bizarre coincidence. But anyway, John Solomon is the guy that basically he was behind the lie that the Clintons profited from the sale of Uranium One. Uranium One was an entity that was sold, and the big sort of thing was that the Clinton Foundation had received a huge amount of money from them, and it transpires that none of this is true. That they received some money from somebody who worked for this company but didn't at the time, and it was nothing. It was a big nothing burger. But according to people, Solomon played an important role in advancing the flawed Trump-friendly tale of corruption in Ukraine involving Biden and his son Hunter, and inspired the effort by Trump to pressure the Ukrainian government into digging up dirt on Trump's rivals. So it turns out that Trump got the idea for that perfect call with Zelensky from reading John Solomon's article. But it transpires that John Solomon's article was not true. So that's where the entire thing started. That's pretty much it. There is one more thing that deserves a bit of attention, but that's essentially that's the meat. That's where it came from. It's the idea that he paid off the Ukrainian government or blackmailed them to get this prosecutor rid of, and that there was some sort of dodginess in CFC, and then there's all the sort of silliness containing like child porn and stuff like that. Transpires that absolutely none of it is true. So there's absolutely nothing on there on Hunter Biden's laptop, whether it be real or not, that is incriminating or shows any level of corruption, aside from the sort of nepotism and rich people giving their kids a huge amount of money to do jobs that they're not actually qualified for. But fucking hell, these lads I went to school with that work for their dad's like construction firm that I wouldn't trust to make me a cup of coffee, and they're in charge like millions of pounds every year. So it's not like this is relegated to the Bidens or even relegated to politics even. It's just the way of the world.
Totally.
Anywho, so where did Rudy Giuliani, because Rudy Giuliani's been in the Ukraine looking at this since about 2018. Why? Who is it? And why is Rudy Giuliani? Well, it turns out that he was influenced heavily by a bloke called Andrzej Derkach and also a bloke called Vitaly Prus. Who are these people? Derkach is a KGB agent. His father was a KGB agent. His father actually worked on, the Satan long-range missiles that we're all terrified of from the Soviet Union. That's what Andrei Derkach's father was working on. He was working on the Satan missiles program. Anyway, in autumn 2019, so this is before he's actually received the laptop from Hunter Biden, from John McIsaac, Derkach has met with Giuliani in the Ukraine. And Rudy has been over there for about a year now looking for dirt on the Bidens in Ukraine. And Derkach is the person that, produced that fake tape of Biden talking to Poroshenko, but also he's the person that told Rudy Giuliani, go and look at Burisma. Go and look at Burisma. And this may have even predated John Solomon writing about it. I'm not entirely sure of the dates, but this is where it's coming from. So in 2019, Derkach holds a press conference and he explains his theory, which he calls demo corruption. Now, see if you can, you might have to play conspiracy theory bingo a little bit here. He said that the Biden family is involved in a corrupt money laundering business scheme in the Ukraine that's ultimately directed by George Soros.
Ding.
Hey, that's a bingo.
Exactly.
Is Bill Gates going to come up in a minute?
No, unfortunately we didn't. But we've gone all the way through without even a hint of anti-Semitism. Well, maybe the Kanye West bit at the beginning, but we've gone through the entire sort of theory without it. But then it raises its head.
That feels like they just wedged that in for completeness. They
did
everything there. It's just like, man, we did all this. There's no source. Shit, what are we going to do?
Well,
it's the capstone on the pyramid, isn't it? Here we go.
Well, that's interesting that you say that, because again, that gives a bearing on the entire theory itself. Because again, if they're willing to sort of mash in crap like that, and this is where it came from, he also said that it was the Ukraine, not Russia, that interfered with the 2016 election, and they tried to help Hillary Clinton. That's bollocks, and he's a KGB agent, so I wouldn't believe him as far as I could fucking throw him. But basically, he graduated from the KGB after enrolling in the KGB school in 1990, and apparently he's friends with Putin, by which I mean he goes to the pub with Putin. Like he's not like friends with Putin like Donald Trump's friends with Putin. Like he's friends with Putin like that, as in like, you know, they've probably had sleepovers and stuff like that. But
I wonder if he's seen Putin shit himself, because that was an excellent rumor that went around that I enjoyed very much.
Yeah, again, I want it to be true, so it's true.
I want to believe too.
Now, again, Lev Parnas, who's a very mysterious person, has also told Politico that Rudy Giuliani knew about Hunter's corruption in early 2019 because of his friend, Vitaly Prus. Who's Vitaly Prus? Well, Vitaly Prus is connected to a firm called Tri-Global Strategic Ventures. He's on the board of this firm. Now, Rudy Giuliani has been involved in this firm that is based in Armenia and the Ukraine, TGSV, since as early as 2003. Now, they help Western companies invest in Russia, but interestingly, TGSV was on the list of companies that is sanctioned by the West ever since the Russian government invaded the Crimea. So Rudy Giuliani has been dealing with a Russian company that is connected with certain KGB agents like Vitaly Prus and Andrei Derkach since 2003. And this is where he got the idea to investigate Hunter Biden's and the Biden's family's corruption in Ukraine. Now, in 2018, Rudy went to Armenia. He was invited there by a bloke called Aya Abramaya, who is also a Russian, who helped construct the Kremlin and was given a Merit to the Fatherland award by Putin. And Abramayan basically asked Rudy to take a message to Trump. Now, the message was via the board of Tri-Global Strategic Ventures, but via Vitaly Prus. What was the message that was given by this Russian guy to Rudy Giuliani, this Russian guy that had been, shall we use the word, grooming Rudy Giuliani since the early 2000s? This message that came via two KGB agents was, investigate the Biden's corruption in the Ukraine. That is the message that came from it. In 2017, Pavel Fuchs, who's a Ukrainian oligarch and a pro-Russian, also hired Rudy Giuliani's security firm. And Fuchs is also said to send huge amounts of money to the Trump campaign. Fuchs also was the person, can you remember the failed Trump Tower Moscow, in which he went there, in which the dossier claimed that he was getting prostitutes to piss on beds and stuff like that?
Yeah.
That was arranged by Pavel Fuchs. Pavel Fuchs is a businessman, a Ukrainian oligarch, pro-Russian, that exclusively uses firms by Rudy Giuliani. Rudy Giuliani, who's been in the Ukraine since 2003, being groomed by at least two KGB agents. So Vitaly Prus of the TGSV, he's also basically, he's Belarus. He lives in New York, but he's actually Belarus born. Now, he happens to be friends with Mykola Zlokevsky, who's the owner of Burisma. But he also has worked on several Russian state-owned gas companies, including Transneft and various others. He's known Rudy since 2003, and he got Rudy to speak at various venues in Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. He also was the person to introduce Rudy Giuliani to former Ukrainian President Poroshenko, and he booked him to speak at a Kremlin-backed security conference in Armenia in both 2017 and 2018. And it was under Vitaly Prus's invitation that Rudy took One American Networks over to Ukraine, where they met with Derkach and were given the fake recording of Biden talking with Poroshenko. Now, here's a very interesting thing that happened. In January 2019, the Russian government was found to have hacked Burisma. This is a fact. It's not contested by the Russian government. The Russian government, for whatever reason, hacked Burisma. And then just a few months later, the laptop turned up.
Interesting.
That is very interesting.
Very interesting, isn't it? Now, I'm not suggesting, yes, I am. I'm heavily inferring that what could have happened is that Russia could have hacked the contents and then arranged it to be released. It certainly looks like Russia's got some sort of hand in it, because basically, like, Rudy Giuliani is basically being led around by at least 3 people connected to the KGB who have been sponsoring his businesses for the last 20 years. And again, all of these terrible, terrible revelations that have supposedly come out of this laptop, not one of them actually shows any degree of illegal activity or anything that is actually could be considered corruption. Is that all connected with the Ukraine and Russia? Potentially, very, very potentially. You can only speculate on that. And I hate to fall into the Russian disinformation, because there's a degree of reality to it. Okay, but I think there's also a degree of Russian of misinformation and disinformation that Rudy Giuliani and certain other people are more than happy to take on face value, shall we say?
Yeah, agreed.
So that is the story of Hunter Biden's laptop. I'm afraid there's not really an awful lot there. And so remember that when they go mental over the next few months, because they are going to go mental with it. They're going to really try and push this. They're going to try and make this into Benghazi 2 or Clinton's emails 2. And again, they're good comparisons because nothing actually happened in either of those incidents. But also remember that they've already investigated the laptop. So all of this, we need to probe into the laptop. You've done it at least 5 times. They've investigated it. And if they've had the laptop and they've had the reports and they've had it, all the evidence for as long as they've had, and as you quite rightly said, Stars, it's quite difficult to actually debunk it because you need to know the intricacies of the timeline and everything else. The reason we know it's bollocks is because they really haven't pushed it. They really haven't pushed it. The only thing that they've pushed it about is this silly meeting and this 10% for the big guy. And if after 2 years that's all they've got nothing.
So here's the thing, right? The same people are going to turn up with some more bullshit about something else in a year or two's time, and I'm sure if we look backwards, in time, it's a weird way of putting it, but whatever. If we look into the past, we'll discover that these guys will have been putting forward bullshit for years.
Yeah.
And may I use a sporting analogy?
Mm-hmm.
So, in Formula 1, years ago, the tracks, whenever you went off the line, had a gravel trap. Yeah. So if you went off the racing circuit, if you ran wide, you went through a gravel trap, and maybe your car got beached in it, maybe you lost time. It was discovered that it was actually safer just to tarmac that as well, because your brakes work properly, so on. You'd have less chance of landing up in the wall or getting flipped or whatever. The problem with that was that there was no penalty for car running wide.
Right.
So particularly in the first time that the Indy cars, which is a different formula, raced at the Circuit of Americas, which is a circuit which was made for Formula 1, they all ran wide at every corner, no problem at all, and the whole thing was ridiculous. So the FIA, which is the governing body of Formula 1, now has got very strict rules about this. At certain corners, they'll look and they'll see if the car goes wide there, they'll get an advantage. So we'll penalise them. They'll get a penalty. They'll get, if it's qualifying, they'll get laps removed from them, and so on. What strikes me about this stuff is that people can just fire shit out, and maybe it sticks, maybe it doesn't.
Yeah.
But there's no penalty against their reputation. There's no lap time getting deleted. There's no 5-second penalty. They can just go again and again and again. There's no gravel trap.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what the solution to that is, but I think it's a real problem.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. People were just prepared to believe lies. And yeah, the very same people, they're the people that came up with Pizzagate. They're the people that came up with Uranium One. They're the people that talked about Benghazi. They're the people that... They're actually the people behind the Clinton Chronicles. I don't know if anyone remembers that doozy from back in the past.
Yeah.
Like listing all the women that he supposedly raped and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And again, with all of these things, like, the important thing to do, right, is take the tiniest hint of truth. For example, Hillary Clinton actually did go to that pizza place. there's no paedophilic ring going on there. But she did actually go to the pizza place. Like, there was some debacle with Benghazi. She did get into bother with her emails. Now, again, if you actually look into all of these things, you find out. I saw someone the other day. Now we know that Hunter Biden's laptop's real. Now investigate Hillary Clinton's emails. So they did. They've done it. They did it fucking years ago. They've done it. They've done it. Like, there was nothing there. But people don't know that.
I will say on Hillary Clinton's emails, the fact that she had her own server, I don't care. I don't care if every email that went through that was perfectly lovely and fine. And I know that politicians have done this, a few times. They should get absolutely hammered for that from a data security perspective, from an archiving perspective. It's ridiculous. Now, that's not to say that people aren't full of shit whenever they talk about it, but she should have been hammered for that, as should everybody in that role. You see, if I started using my personal email for work,
totally,
I'd also kick my ass, and we don't even have like this sort of archiving stuff.
The theory regarding her emails was that basically they were classified, and they weren't. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but the too long didn't read is basically no, they weren't. No, they weren't. So, yeah, but again, as you say, this is the problem. You can just throw shit at the wall and see if it sticks, and it becomes a truism. And in many ways, that is kind of why we're doing this in a broader sense, because we found, like, even with things that we thought we knew about, that like Bohemian Grove and stuff like that, there's certain truisms, like Alex was the first person to ever get inside there, and then we find out that news crews have been in there 5-6 times before and filmed, like, The Ritual, for example, and stuff like that. So this is again, as you say, the problem with it's an information war. Oh, it's an info war. Like, there is an element of corruption. There's no way Hunter Biden should be working for a company that has got that degree of corruption for it. Not because it's illegal, just because it looks bad. It looks bad. Right, okay. And if there's the whiff of corruption, you know what people say, no smoke without fire. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's true, but it's that hint of truth. I'll put it this way. If Hunter Biden never worked for that corrupt firm, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. So, and that is the problem. But also, and there's a tribalism, in as much as a lot of people really do believe that Trump's phone call was fine when the evidence shows that it wasn't, and that the reason that they're telling you it wasn't was because Joe Biden did exactly the same thing in Ukraine in order to protect his son, but he didn't. It just isn't true.
So, as for the claim that the movie makes, that this would have completely decimated Biden's election?
If it had got enough traction, because I strongly believe that even though Pizzagate is utter shite, that to a degree that informed some voters who are like, "Ooh, paedophilia! I don't want to be involved in anything like that." So there might be somebody that basically, like, the concept of Hunter Biden's laptop. I'm sure there's people that believe that it is, but I think a lot of those people would have voted for Trump in the first place anyway. So, like, the long and short of it is that not if anybody had actually looked into what had actually happened. There's no way you would have, like, could it have caused a blip? Like, yeah, potentially, like, because there's always been crap that's floated around that then later turns out not to be true, but people go with it or whatnot. But only in that regard, only in regard of if enough people believed it. The actual meat and potatoes of what is on that laptop, it's, to coin a MAGA phrase, it's a nothing burger.
Yeah, I think at every single step of this, like, when you present something, it sounds exciting, and then it's a nothing. It's just like, it's just a letdown at every single stage. There's nothing there.
I am sorry, Brent. I did my best.
Please don't do an episode into Putin falling down the stairs and shitting his pants.
Oh, we're doing that next.
How did you know?
Please conclude that it's true.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, guys. Can you tell everyone where to find you?
Yeah, I'm on twitter.com/starsofcovid, and you will also find me as one of the 3 presenters of the Lads on Tour podcast, alongside Ivor and Brent, who you have heard from as well today, obviously. And I really concentrate mostly on countering COVID-related misinformation, hence the name Stars of COVID.
Yeah, so and I'm ivermectin, that's also a satirical name about COVID. And yeah, so I'll have my book out. We already talked about that. Well, the second edition of my book out. And yeah, I'm available on Twitter at ivermectin1. And yeah, you can find me also on Odyssey, where I've done some really long videos like this one will inevitably be about Michael Yeadon and Claire Craig. I still need to finish one of them, actually. So
when you say finish one of them, do you mean murder either Claire Craig or Michael Yeadon?
No, I don't mean that.
Oh, well, I mean, fair enough. But if you change your mind, I've got a van.
The next episode actually of the Lads on Tour podcast that we should mention does involve Jordan Wilden of Logically. So as soon as I get a file from Brent, we'll be uploading that to the internet for everyone to hear. No pressure, Brent.
None taken.
I'm sure this one will take hours to edit, yeah.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, sound. So that wraps up the year. We've had a great year together, and I wanted to say thank you to all three of you, actually. That's why I wanted to do this episode at the end of the year. You guys have played a massive part in my journey, and seriously, humbly, thank you for being a part of that.
Oh, it's a pleasure, mate.
Yeah, thank you, Brent. And it's been a good, well, it's been a shit year.
It's an interesting,
but yeah, it's been interesting. Yeah, but it's been great. It's been great to be involved with you guys over the last year as a sort of regular co-host with Brent and Iber, and occasionally appearing alongside Neil on bits and pieces. Yeah, it's been lots of fun, actually.
It really has, yeah.
It sure has.